All right, good evening, everyone. We're on episode 76 of the Talking Landscape Photography Show. And Luke and I actually just spent about an hour and a half this afternoon coming up with about a potential 70 other shows. Can you believe it? So you think we've been running out of steam by now after our decision to do 6 episodes about a year and a half ago, but we're still going. So I was literally in the middle of running my exhibition, which is still on, Sky Dreaming, and we're looking for ideas for the show. And one of the things we can do, running our own shows, be spontaneous and come up with things on the spot. And literally just yesterday or the day before, I mentioned it to you, Lukey, why don't we try this? And immediately thought of Ricardo and Tom and Chris as people that whose opinion I really look up to and who have been in this kind of realm for a long time, and who'd be really good to get a discussion panel on, because exhibitions, I guess, they're kind of like a rite of passage for any photographer. Everyone at some stage who spends a bit of committed amount of time in their craft sort of considers the idea, if not putting it into reality. And hopefully tonight we can explore sort of avenues where you can be more empowered to do so and more educated. And a lot of us have tripped and fallen on our faces and done a lot of things that you probably don't want to repeat. And also maybe a bit of confidence. And we'll probably finish the show, or at least include a section on the future and how we see exhibitions evolving, and also how to handle exhibitions in a COVID landscape. I mean, that's obviously come up for me literally right now. When I booked this exhibition, the Sky Dreaming, there was not a single case in Tasmania for over a year. So all of a sudden that reality's come in, and, limited numbers for openings and that kind of thing. So I had to be a little bit adaptive about why and how to engage with audiences and sell things and that kind of thing. So we'll cover that sort of area. But I think from a very, very simplistic point of view, I might start the ball rolling tonight. Nick and Lukey, you're right if we jump straight into it? Have you got anything pressing you want to jump on before we launch into the show proper? Or?
First of all, I think we should celebrate a milestone of 1,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. 1,000. I mean, 1 million. 1,000. Yeah.
Just small beginnings, but it's just really great to have everyone on board subscribing. And it does mean you may see some ads showing up on our feed. So it's really handy to have a bit of monetization now to help offset our Zoom costs and things like that. So if you do see that, apologies, but it does help to support us.
Yeah, it costs a lot bringing Tom all the time. Like it's
he's not cheap.
Just now, it doesn't start talking, and next thing you know, 2 hours is gone. And
does this make us YouTubers then?
Well, yeah. Well, I was going to talk to you about that, Nick. Yeah, sorry if you're becoming an influencer now. You may have to evaluate your life choices
yourself,
and things like that. So
I'm so incredibly excited about calling myself a YouTuber. You can just see it. See the enthusiasm oozing from me.
Well, there's a lot of great people on there, Nick. Alex Snail's got a channel, and a few of the other guys.
Look, yes, you know me. I'm just being me. So,
yeah. Anything big on the press, gentlemen, this past week for you?
I think it's been just putting heads down. I think things are getting into the swing of things now. So it's nice to be able to get stuck into some work, I think, and all of that. So, yeah, not too much, but I've got a few big hikes planned. So pretty excited about that. Just trying to get all the work done before then. So that's what I've been up to.
Nick, you've got car number 3 or whatever in the last.
You didn't have to bring up my car troubles.
Sorry, I couldn't help it.
Yes. Anyway, had very bad luck with cars, and now I've got another car. So yeah, it's a long story, and I won't bore anyone with it. But
you can start a YouTube channel on it now.
Completely, the worst luck you've heard, I think. But it's good that you've got a beast to get you to all of your shoots and things like that now. So.
Yeah, well, hopefully. So I hope it doesn't fall to pieces. We'll see. I don't know. I'm a bit apprehensive, but anyway.
I always travel with a bike in the back of my car, Nick. So anything happens, I've got plan B.
Yeah, I travel with a telephone. I can just come and get me tow truck.
I just got a little lock system, so I can actually lock it in the back of my car as well, because it's a pretty nice. Just upgraded my bike for the first time in 16 years. So it's pretty snazzy.
Oh, nice. Have you seen the wonderful YouTube channel, The Lock Picking Lawyer?
No.
No, well, you'll soon learn that none of those locks are any good whatsoever, and you may as well just
adds
put
a
it out
10-second delay. It's a psychological thing. I don't know.
Luckily, you know
You'd
someone
know in your line of work, mate. But
you know someone that could do the fingerprints though, so that's handy.
Oh yeah, yes, yay.
My week's been taken up with the Sky Dreaming exhibition, which is why I'm pretty excited about tonight because it's pretty fresh and relevant. And I actually think I'm going to end up taking away some things from tonight that I can actually literally apply straight away. So we had the opening on Friday night and artist viewings on the Saturday and a big artist talk on Sunday afternoon and a few guest star visits from people like Nick, where he got the one-on-one artist walkthroughs. Rob Blake has tried to get into the gallery this afternoon, and I forgot that it was a public holiday. Oh. It's like a 40-minute drive out of town.
Oh no!
Sorry, Rob. I think he's down there anyway. I hope. I mean, that's the thing. You know, it's sort of. We'll talk about this through the stage. Like, you know, do I actually go down there and sit there for 3 weeks? You know, every day, like myself, or do I sort of? I've chosen to do sort of targeted events and the people at the space kind of running in between, But yeah, so it's pretty fresh on my mind, and that's partly why tonight felt pretty apt. And I saw that Chris was just launching an upcoming show himself. Tom's basically living and breathing the lifestyle of having a permanent exhibition, really. Rick and I have done a stack of exhibitions together all around the country over the last 5 years. So, you know, and Nick's been in a bunch. In fact, Nick got on a bunch when I didn't even get asked, and I was like, oh, "Who's this guy?" That
was my big break, Paul. That was
Nick had some big breaks, and I was like, "Yeah, nobody loves me."
Oh, well, that's all changed, Paul. Everyone loves you now, so you're right.
And well, Tom loves himself. You can show us the back of his shirt later, just to remind everyone in case. But I think I'd like to start the show tonight, gentlemen. Like, I think the platform we're going to use is I've got a whole series of sort of ideas that I sent around to everyone before the show, and we'll just kind of do them ad hoc and lay a big question out and allow each other a sort of a freedom of response. So my first question, a very simple one, but a very important one, is why? Why exhibit your work? The floor is open, gentlemen.
Rick, you're unmuted. You may as well say something.
Yes, Nick. Well, for me, there's no better way to experience a body of work than in print, and in large print. I think it's the ultimate way to experience a body of work, and so for that reason, that's the why for me, to give or present the best possible experience to an audience that would like to experience the body of work that you want to exhibit at its very best. It's just unparalleled. There's no comparison in my point of view. I've really enjoyed a number of exhibitions that I've been to, and I've seen the body of work online on a website, but there's just nothing comes close to when you actually witness it for yourself, and you get up close and you just witness that incredible, intricate detail in the print. Nothing comes close. So for me, that's the whole reason why. Yeah, and it's just such a joy as well to put on a show, an exhibition, and have that interaction with an audience. Feed off the energy of an audience and share your stories behind each image, and the narratives and the why of each image, and to be able to share that with an audience, it's just such an enjoyable and experience. That alone for me warrants the justification of having an exhibition. Yeah.
Chris, how about yourself, mate? I've been keeping my eye out. Apart from Tom, who's living and breathing it, Chris is probably one of the more active people I've seen in Australia in the landscape realm for regularly coming out with kind of, you know, world-class exhibitions like he's capable of producing. Chris, what's your driving force, my friend? What keeps you trucking away?
Probably, I'd say there's a couple of reasons, Paul. The first one would be it's a bit like print competitions. Essentially, you're putting yourself out there, and that in itself, forces you to put to work on your work and get it as best as you can. Because when it's when it's hung on a wall, people are going to stare at it for a long time. So you want to make sure that it's your best quality stuff. So I think there's a self-development aspect to it that I certainly enjoy. I would say outside of the second reason is it's actually a collection of work. Typically people only get to present one image at a time, and in an exhibition you get to present a body of work, and that can have a bit of a narrative, and you can generally create a bit more of a feeling around the space. So there's that aspect to it that you don't get by just doing sort of one-off prints. And then I think that the last piece is, and this is more of a new thing for me, is more around the commercial side of it, and making selling art through galleries and things like that, which I think wasn't where I started at when I started exhibiting, but it's certainly where I have moved to, I think.
Chris, how much do you think your AOPP win sort of helped move you along into that circle?
Look, I think obviously I'm based in Perth, and there's a bit of a dearth of gallery opportunities in WA. There's really only one or two art galleries, and they already have their favorite sort of thing, and so there isn't really much space if you're emerging into sort of a fine art world. It's not like Melbourne or Sydney, I guess, where you've got opportunities to do stuff. So short of running your own gallery, it's quite challenging. So actually having a bit of an accolade that you can basically means that people will take you seriously when you start a conversation, but that only gets you so far, and then ultimately you're still, it still comes down to the quality of what you're presenting and putting forward. What I would say is Perth is really lucky to have something called the Bunker Gallery, which is run by Team Digital. And those guys effectively, they find sponsors, whether it's Ilford or whoever, to pay for the paper. And they invite people to come in and put a solo or group exhibition together and fill a room. And that sort of de-stresses it. It's a safe place, and it's not a commercial exhibition as such, and it's a soft entry into it. And I think if I'd be interested to know whether that facility exists elsewhere, but certainly the guys at Team Digital, Ben Walton and so on, they did a great job of initiating that in WA, and was certainly how I got into it.
What was their other one? The Golden something?
Golden shopping trolleys. Yeah, that still runs every year. So that's sort of a group, and they do paste ups as well. So there are opportunities throughout the year where, as part of a community, you can enter into a competition or just paste stuff up on the wall. But it's in a gallery space, and it's you know that your peers and other professional photographers are going to go through there and see it, and you can expect some valued feedback from it, sort of thing.
The feedback and the interest. The two things that stood out from that conversation was that Ricardo reminded me that that's the interactive aspect of it. Like, it's actually not that common to get direct kind of live interaction with your work.
Yeah.
Like, I actually really enjoyed having Nick down there the other day and getting his kind of refined eye, sort of brushing over the intricacies of it, and discovering someone like Tom that he wasn't aware of before, and getting a sense of how we created this kaleidoscope together of two very different artists from different backgrounds that have come together to create a body of work. Tom, how you've just sort of been down this road quite a few times, I guess, over the years, and you're living and walking, and you're living in a different realm where we're running a permanent gallery now. But what do you say is your ongoing and your initial kind of motivation for print-based exhibiting?
I think it's the opportunity just to share my work. I think at the end of the day, I love that idea of being able to have it up on a wall and be able to display it. And it's exciting for me to shoot something like that one there, that it was only shot several months ago, and literally I could photograph it and go, yeah, that'd go well in the gallery, and pop it up on the wall and sell it within 2 to 3 weeks of actually taking the photograph. I am in a fortunate position in running this gallery in that I can decide whatever I want to have on the walls, and therefore I can go through my back catalogue of stuff and go, actually, I've never printed that before. That'd be exciting to actually see it in print. And, agreeing with what Chris and Rick have said, is nothing better than actually seeing your own art in the printed format. It just takes on a whole different meaning, a whole different life. But for me, I was motivated by Ken Duncan and walking into his gallery in Southbank, 1997, I think it was. And I still to this day joke that he owes me a lot of money, because that just had me want to exhibit my work. I saw him doing that, and that just put me on this path of, great, I want to be a landscape photographer and a commercial landscape photographer and this is a way of doing it, by selling your artwork. It's not something where up until that point, I just saw landscape photography as being done by amateur or keen photographers who just happen to enjoy the outdoors, or keen bushwalkers and environmentalists like Rob Blakers, etc. I didn't think it was actually possible to do it professionally. So I had always wanted to have my own gallery, and 20 years later, I finally got that opportunity. And so I do love, first and foremost, the idea of having my artwork on the walls, that if people love it enough, they can purchase it for themselves, which is, hugely flattering. I do love that interaction, as you guys have touched on already. I love the idea of being able to talk to people about the art. I introduce myself when they first come in the door, and then I say, look, I'm the artist. If you'd like to know anything more about the photographs, just let me know. And occasionally they do want to know more of the story behind the art, etc., or how it's printed and the mechanics of it all. And so I do enjoy sharing that story with other people as well. So of course it's commercial. It's got to be a success. It's at least $1,000 a week for me to have these stores open. So it is also about selling the art, that's for sure. But I've taken out a relatively small space here in Main Street, Mornington, in the sort of sunny seaside suburb of Mornington, where I don't have to stress too much about the rent. It doesn't keep me awake at night. That's not to say that it hasn't been a challenge, that's for sure. But by the same token, it just means that I still get to do what I love, but without having to lie awake at night wondering whether or not I'm going to sell anything today or tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll definitely give some voice to that commercial aspect of it. Luke and Nick, is there anything you want to add in terms of the why, or what inspiration you've gained from actually attending them or being part of them, or what you see as their relevance in the photographic world, particularly from a landscape genre?
Absolutely agree with Tom in terms of inspiration and seeing these works of art on the wall. And like I always go to, say, the Cradle Mountain Wilderness Gallery to get a dose of inspiration before I go out into the wilds there. And it obviously it makes you want to share your own work, and so it's definitely a great source of inspiration for that. And I guess from someone like myself too, I don't actually print a huge amount of my work, so the idea of having an exhibition means that I might see my work larger than I've ever seen it before. I'm sure that's the case for everyone here as well. You get to, like the big print that you had on display as you walk into your show, Paul, such a showstopper, and I'm sure you've never seen it that big, and if you weren't doing an exhibition, then that wouldn't have happened. So exactly. I do like the fact that it encourages you to spread your wings like that, and as maybe a personal development or self-development opportunity, and it's just a culmination of all of the hard work that you've done and being able to put it out there for everyone to enjoy. It's a beautiful thing, really. So yeah, absolutely.
And Nick?
Yeah, I first got the opportunity to exhibit about 10 years ago, and I was invited to exhibit, and it was a wonderful opportunity and experience. And to that point, I'd never really printed my work much at all. There was hardly any of that. But I'd been inspired over the years by going to exhibitions and seeing large prints on the wall, and I never really imagined that my photography could be could look that good, I suppose. And when I was given the opportunity to exhibit, and I started getting some of the larger prints done, I realised that really it's something that is open to everyone to be able to print, that sort of size and detail, and really be proud of your work in such a different way. It's all well and good showing stuff on the internet, but to see things in print and then see that yes, it actually does stack up. You've got a 30-inch print on the wall, and it looks as good as 30-inch prints that you've seen from other people, and it was like a light bulb moment for me that just sort of opened up the whole opportunity of photography. That this, it wasn't just based on what I was seeing on the back of the camera, what I was seeing on the computer screen, and what I was sharing on social media. It was just a really big step to take, but and quite scary at the time because there was a lot of money involved. But when it happened, it was just this huge revelation, and I really encourage people that haven't thought about exhibiting their work to take the plunge if they get the opportunity.
Yeah, I've got I guess there's a lot of reasons for me about the significance of it. I think it's rare that you get a chance to showcase your work at the best that it can be. And I think in a big print version, the tangibility, the accessibility, the textural components, the legacy aspect of it being physically able to be stored and held in people's homes and in a real space sort of has something going on for it that's really significant. There's a lot of historical comments that a photograph doesn't really exist until it's made into print form, and we're sort of transitioning away from that realm, which in some ways I think for me makes exhibiting even more significant because it's probably becoming rare. At the same time as I want to be opening to adapt and evolve with future, virtual and 3D sort of exhibitions that are probably not far around the corner and already happening. I think the sharing aspect is really important. Like one of the reasons I put the show on this week is I haven't had a show in Tasmania for 13 or 14 years. And it's rare for people close to me who have really supported me and been a part of my photographic journey to actually interact with the work and to have the community and the people that I care about around me, learn, I guess, get a lot of insight into who I am as well, because I think art is a way of expressing. It's a powerful form of self-expression as much as an interpretation of things around you. As you get more and more deeper into it, it speaks more and more of who you are. And I see that in particular with, Ricardo and Ricardo's work in particular, with being so depthful and deeply considered and very conceptual in nature. It speaks hugely of who he is as a person, as an artist. And I don't know how Chris learned to finesse his prints like he does, but I don't know if I've seen anyone in the world to print as well as he does. And that's saying something because I've seen a lot of prints. And Tom's translated his work into print form like few of us have. He's just doing book number 15. And to me, that's an incredible legacy to be left behind way beyond lifetime. And to know that we can print work now that could be literally up in places for, even hundreds of years is holds significance to me personally, I think.
Mm.
I also think if you want to move down a more fine art realm, it runs on the board and it's literally part of the deal, whether it's commercially viable for a single exhibition or not. Having a continuation slowly starts building up the credibility. Like when Ricardo and I were approaching galleries for the Light Collective, if we'd been in another gallery before, that was like, oh, okay. Each one we went in was a bit of a box tick for credibility in terms of down the track. So I do think there's a pathway that's almost like a, I don't know, you guys can share your thoughts on this. It's almost like a bit of an expectation if you're moving into more of a fine art realm, that you keep plugging away and you're constantly producing work. And if you want to build relationships with galleries and move into something that's more sustainable long-term, that's part of the commitment. You guys have any thoughts about that? Sort of a more of a fine art kind of approach to it and where exhibitions sit in that?
I think if you're being represented by a gallery, for example, I mean, that's a huge honor. It probably doesn't apply much to the people perhaps watching this, but yeah, I certainly think there'd be an expectation to continue to produce work to a very high standard, limited editions, etc. Look at Murray Fredericks, for example, represented by Arc One here in Australia, a gallery in London as well as New York, and perhaps one other. You know, they would take him on board, I'm sure, because they love his work, but also too they see that that's somebody who's going to keep producing good work, and that's an opportunity for them to keep showing his work to their customer base who like his work and collect his work, so that he's coming back every 2, 3, 4, 5 years, however long that might be, in order to be able to collect his work. So yeah, I think as a fine art artist, that's certainly something you'd want to keep on doing. I mean,
well, taking a step back, Tom, like just where, rather than just that narrow realm that I probably didn't mean to steer you down, is where is exhibiting in general play a role in terms of what does it build to, what does it allow, what does it enable that wouldn't happen otherwise? You know, what's its sort of underlying impact and purpose on a career or your reputation as a photographer?
Well, I think at the end of the day, if I understand what you're asking there, you know, if you're looking at sort of making it as an artist or being more well known in the industry, for example, or wanting to make more of a career out of it as an artist, I think you can look at things like, you know, owning your own gallery, or regularly exhibiting your work, or achieving great results in awards, if that's your flavor, publishing your own books. There's various things that you can do and tick off that list, some, all, whatever you like, in order to be considered in that realm. And so therefore, I think exhibiting is one of those things that obviously gets your name out there. And if you're doing it regularly enough, I think you start to get noticed, whether that's within the industry amongst fellow photographers, or whether that's amongst collectors and people who admire your work, etc. I think it's a great feather to have in your cap. I just think at the end of the day, and we'll get onto this conversation soon, it's about the viability of it. It's about it's all very well and good to have an exhibition and show your work, but obviously you've got to look at the financials of it all in order to be able to do it once and do it well, or do it once and then have another go, etc. But I'm sure we'll talk about that soon.
Well, I think I'll pull back a little bit, because, you know, our audience is pretty broad and wide, but one of the things, if you start thinking outside of the box, because I'm still sort of in that kind of why kind of realm question, is that it can be an incredible platform to bring people together. It can be very joining in terms of cause. It can be a wonderful way to support a cause and actually generate funds for supporting something amazing. And one of the things I found personally, Tom, is I started off doing solo exhibitions, and I did a number probably 15, 12 and 10 years ago. And then most of the last sort of 10 years, most of them have been collaborative. And that touches a little bit on that commercial viability, and it takes a lot of the financial risk away just from yourself. It means that you collectively have a lot more contacts and resources and people that you can draw into an exhibition. And I think that's a significant part of it, is if you don't have a base already, it's kind of hard to get people in the door to some extent. And the more you can reach out into different realms, then the more opportunity you've got to share the work, because the limitation is that with a physical exhibition is how many people you literally get in the door. And we'll have a discussion later about how to maybe get around that, particularly during COVID time. But I mean, you know, the why factor for the Light Collective is very highly conservation based. And I've been part of 7 or I think even 9 different exhibitions on the Tscharke that are all, you know, causal based, and they bring a huge community together for a really positive cause for conservation. And so I think it's kind of interesting to maybe explore some of the wider purposes and exhibitions, and the accessibility of it as well. Like I remember early on, I used to be in a lot of camera club exhibitions and things like that, where I only had to come up with a couple of prints or 3 or 4 prints, and they already had the frames made, so the cost was low. So I guess I just didn't want to go down too narrow a path for our audience who then think, well, I'm not going down there. But where do I want to start, or how do I want to engage in a way where I'm not taking maybe as much risk, or maybe I'm not ready to go solo? But I do think, you know, collective exhibitions can be really powerful. And I don't know, Rick, how do you feel about what we've done with the Light Collective and sort of the reach we've managed to get, and that very sort of the satisfaction of that kind of purpose orientated approach collectively with exhibitions?
It's always the highlight of any project for me with the Light Collective is that opportunity to speak to an audience of like-minded people who appreciate art, photography, and share the stories behind that go towards creating the work, and more specifically my images and the narratives that I intend to communicate with each of my images. It's always the highlight and of any project that we've undertaken together, Paul, even more so than the book, because I get to talk about it. Unlike with the book, it's used as a vehicle to share your work, but you don't have that interaction with the viewer, the person who's holding the book. Whereas with an exhibition, I find that when you're within that mix and you've got people who very much are curious to understand, to talk deeper about each image with you, it's always a buzz, and I really feed off that energy, particularly with an opening when you have the majority of people coming through. It's just a thrill and a real privilege to be able to share my work in that, I guess, in that capacity. So it's always super worthwhile. And I think with each of our projects that we've worked on together with the other lads of the Light Collective, I think it's always been the pinnacle for us to get to that night, to have that book that we release jointly with the exhibition opening. It's always a huge milestone as part of the project. And for me, it's that, okay, we've arrived with this project and we now get to share it in a tangible format with people who we're wanting to share that message with. So, yeah, I wouldn't undertake a project without an exhibition being part of one of the deliverables. I think it's just just a non-negotiable. And I see Chris nodding there, and I know he's done some work with Chris as well. And yeah, they've done, and I've been privileged to attend one of the exhibitions, a couple of years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago now, actually. And yeah, it's just incredible when you see it on a website, you see the body of work as small JPEG thumbnails, but it's just a whole nother experience when you're there and you're looking at 1 meter by 1 meter square prints. It's just a whole nother experience. Yeah.
Well, Rico, I'd say one of the highlights for me, probably ever actually in my life, was getting to a point where we had enough that I could knock on Bob Brown's door and say, hey, do you want to come and open our show? And he was like, sure, mate. And he freaking did. And it was just like, oh my God, one of my heroes is honoring all of us. And that was purely through, that joining of cause. And that's collectively, we had a lot of clout. And that's probably going to lead me to my next question. A simple one, but worth exploring is, if you're looking at solo versus group shows, what are the sort of pros and cons of both? Why would you draw towards one or the other? And maybe just have a few reflections on our experiences in that regard.
Well, maybe we can sort of go back to the bare bones. We've hinted at that our audience is wide. So it's probably worth talking about the bare bones. Like, where do you physically start if you want to exhibit and you've never exhibited before? And where do people start and what opportunities there are? And then obviously we're going to get into the pros and cons of being part of a bigger group and then doing a solo and that sort of thing, and the costs involved, which are substantial. But it can be really quite accessible to get into an exhibition if you are a member of a camera club. For example, I mean, down here in Hobart, there are several camera clubs and they exhibit from time to time. The Hobart Photographic Society exhibits once a year, although I'm not sure they've been able to run it the last year or two with COVID. And they have a wonderful venue right on the waterfront in Hobart that's sort of made for exhibiting work, and their members have the chance to put 2, 3, 4 prints up on the wall, and at a very low cost to do so. And that really must be the start of exhibiting for a lot of people. and
Well, it touches on that group solo next straight away. Like there's an accessibility from a group that, as I alluded to earlier, where the financial risk is really, really low. The physical commitment of the amount of work. If you're trying to fill up an entire gallery on your own, it can be really intimidating depending how big it is.
Yeah.
And also you've got people around you that have been experienced and done it before. You can bounce off. You potentially got access to a group discount on printing. Certainly with a group like that, they tend to get a discount on the cost of the space, and it spreads it all out. So there's a lot of really positive reasons, I think. And funny enough, even on a high-end commercial level, I've actually carried on that conversation. And there's a reason why for the last 10 years, most of my exhibitions have been group as well. But so that's it's a really relevant point. Chris, you look like you're waving your hand up there.
I was just going to say, I think there's actually probably this, and I'm sure there's more, but I'm going to say there's 3 types of, exhibition. I would say, there's the camera club type, where an organization organizes something for you, and effectively you put 1 or 2 prints into that, and that's a great entry point to get your work out there, to see it amongst peers. But it's probably not a curated, cohesive body of work. It's a group of individuals who are displaying individual pieces. And then I think, back to Rick's point, you've got you might team up with someone and go, we want to go and let's go and shoot this project with the objective of holding an exhibition at the end of it. And that's another way of collaborating. It shares the load, and that might be 1 or 2 people, it might be 4 people, but it's a way of, but again, it's a way of getting in there. And then there is but that has its challenges as well, because again, you don't want to present work that looks like 4 individuals. Again, it has to be a cohesive body of work, and that in itself is quite challenging. You don't want 4 different sets of images when you walk into an exhibition about a particular subject. So if you're working with a group on a project, it's not just the subject, it's almost presentation style that you need to align on and get that, get some commonality there. And then the third bit is where you have 100% control, but you've got all the exposure as well. So, is to go solo basically. And then you can say, I'm basically going to run an exhibition on this subject. It's 100% my artistic call. I reap all the rewards, but I also get all the risk as well. So, and there's a spectrum there for sure. And they all have pros and cons. I think having done a few collaborations with Chris Dark, having been lucky to share some experiences with him, we from the outset, the whole end game was to run an exhibition, and we booked the exhibition before we'd even started shooting. So again, it gave us some pressure and direction to go and make something happen, and a bit of a deadline and things like that. So that's my perspective on it anyway.
I think what's really interesting about that, Chris, is what comes first, the idea and the theme, or the exhibition. Like, I think for me, there's a transition often early on. It's almost the other way around. It's like, I should have an exhibition. How do I create and theme a body of work together that's actually going to sit together with purpose and have a container around it, or a title or a theme. Whereas later on, as I get more refined and purposeful with my work, it's like I'm working on this body of work, which I know I will exhibit at a period of time. Anyone sort of have any thoughts about that conversation about sort of what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you think both are just as relevant as each other, or what do you think?
I'll chime in quickly. So I would say both are as relevant as each other. I think the last exhibition I did was very focused with Chris on a particular theme. We went out and we shot it with a particular target in mind and delivered to a brief effectively to each other. The next exhibition, which opens in about a month's time, which I'm doing as a solo, is essentially, it's a retrospective, essentially back catalogue of aerial abstract imagery that hangs together quite nicely, but it wasn't envisaged from the outset as a as an exhibition. Yeah.
What are the barriers for people to exhibit? I guess we probably should talk about those in the same context of the accessibility of, in groups or whatever, but there's a whole bunch of logistics that have to be overcome before you can actually exhibit. And obviously the printing side of that is one side, but what does it actually take to run an exhibition? What do you need to do? You obviously you've got to find somewhere to have it. And from there, what are the physical things that people need to do to organise an exhibition?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question, and it might be too much to do in just one answer, because you've got to do a list, you've got funding, you've got physical costs, you've got printing, printing papers, printing choices, whether you frame, whether you mount, you've got your choice of venue, you've got the cost of the venue itself, you've got whether you edition, you've got what size of the prints you're going to do, obviously whether it's solo or group, you've got the marketing, promotion, socials. I had that sort of broken down to a few different sections, because it's such a big question in one go. And
it is, but we want to try and break down some of these barriers for people so they do think it is achievable to exhibit, I suppose, was what I was.
I was thinking we sort of pick a few things at a time. And then go through them one by one through the show. That was kind of my idea.
Yeah. So a lot of the, if you're exhibiting with a camera club, and you're a rank and file member of the camera club, you're not, the treasurer and secretary and president and all that, it's likely that most of the logistics are going to be worked out for you. They're the old hands that have done it before, they're going to work it out, and they're going to run all this stuff for you, and they're going to say, right, all you need to do is pick what images you want, how you're going to present them, and these are some of the rules that we have. So we sort of don't, one person puts in a 12 by 8 inch print, another person puts in a meter long print, that sort of thing. But that, again, that's a very accessible way to get into it. But what are the, getting away from the printing side though, how do you find a venue, for example? What should you be looking for? If you're just a small group of people, you're away from the camera club, you want to progress a bit, and you're a small group of people or an individual, what should you be looking for, and what sort of consideration should you have for a venue?
Excellent question.
I'll have a first go at answering that question, Nick. What I look for when I'm looking at a gallery is accessibility. First and foremost is how accessible is this particular space to the wider public, because you want to ideally hold it in a place that is easy to get to. You don't want to be holding an exhibition that's inaccessible to the masses, because obviously you'll really limit your audience. So accessibility certainly first and foremost, and then secondly, looking at the lighting. Lighting is super important. Obviously the physical space, and look at what the gallery hire arrangement entails. Is it a per day? Is it a per week? Look, that will obviously determine, I guess, what you enter into, because if it's a per day that the cost is too high, then obviously that will really limit how long you'll have the exhibition for. And ideally you want to have a body of work on show for 2 to 3 weeks, at least a fortnight, with an opening night. So yeah, accessibility for me is the first thing that I look for. And also another thing as well is the actual, the database of people that the gallery can reach, can tap into, because looking at some past gallery spaces that we've exhibited to, you can really leverage from a big database of people who've attended past galleries, and you can obviously, part of the arrangement is that gallery will broadcast your exhibition to their mailing list, and some galleries can have in excess of thousands of people on that database, and so that's a real great way to leverage a much larger audience and get more pull. So there's some of the factors that come first to mind for me, but I'm sure Chris, obviously exhibiting at Bunker Bay there with Team Digital. How did you come about that space, and did you look at any other spaces before you settled on Bunker Bay? Not Bunker Bay, sorry, the Bunker Gallery.
Bunker Bay is a great spot to hang out as well. Yeah, so look, in terms of just building on that, I think the guys at Team Digital have done a great job in creating a bit of a community vibe, and essentially they approached us and said, I think your stuff's good enough. We'd love to have an exhibition here. So it was more the other way around. Essentially when you're in and out there a few times a month, they were sort of, you build a relationship with them, and so that was more of an invitational sort of thing. But they're on those guys are certainly on the lookout for up and coming people that they can help give a bit of a leg up to. The flip side in terms of what you're saying, Rick, is they're a commercial gallery, accessible galleries, things like that. They make their money based. They don't make it necessarily based on what you're renting the space for. They make it based on what they sell off the wall. So to a certain extent, coming back to Nick's point of what are the barriers, what a gallery wants to know is, when it comes down to it, how much stuff are you going to sell? If it's a commercial gallery that you're approaching. Yeah. If it's not, then I agree. Then you're looking at community spaces and things like that where you can share your work. But in terms of barriers to commercial galleries, that really comes down to artist CVs, track record of exhibitions. Again, that one-upmanship each time. You exhibited here, now you can go here. That sort of thing, and building a bit of a track record. And having some references that sort of say, you were commercially successful in one exhibition is a great sell to be able to give that info to the next commercial space, I guess. So yeah, that would be my. I can see Tom as well was itching to get in there right from the outset. So
well, I was just going to say, I think the choice of space depends on your motivation for doing or exhibiting your work in the first place, whether it be as a group or solo. So at the end of the day, I agree with Rick. If you're looking to exhibit simply because you like the idea of exhibiting your work, you would obviously want to make it in a space that is accessible to your family and friends. Physical distance, etc., so that they can obviously attend and see your work and come to an opening night and be able to see it. I think if your motivation is more, I want to absolutely put my work on the wall, but I want to sell it. I want to start my career in selling my art. That's much more around the lines of approaching a commercial gallery and having a strong database whereby the customers who are part of that gallery, who are on that database, are going to actually be interested in your work. So I'd be in that frame of reference or that mindset of actually interviewing the gallery owner or manager before you decide to commit to actually exhibiting your work. So asking them questions like, how many are on your database, and what sort of art are they interested in? Because if they're more interested in sculptures and you're exhibiting photography, well, that's not going to be a match. So you want to make sure that there's a match between obviously your landscape photography and that it's going to interest their clientele.
Well, I personally don't have any experience with commercial galleries, but I thought I'd just pair it back again just to keep us on a level playing field with our audience. One, I'm sure we've all had this experience, and we've probably all done it, where we've been approached by a cafe, for example, and cafes are a real big one for it. And they say, "Hey, we really like your work. Do you want to print it out and put it on our walls? We won't charge you anything for it. But the offset for them is they get free art on their walls, and you can put the stuff on the walls and then sell the work." Now, in my experience, and I've only really done this once, it wasn't particularly successful in terms of selling work, because I think people go to a cafe for coffee. They don't go to a cafe to buy art. Whereas in a commercial gallery or a space that is open specifically for an exhibition, the people that are walking through the door are there to appreciate art and look at art, not just sort of look at their phone, have a sip of their coffee, glance at what's on the wall, look around a bit. What are your guys' experiences with that very entry-level way of exhibiting? I guess just from a logistical point of view, or no, from a quality point of view, the lighting is not going to be ideal in most cases. Although there are some cafes that are much better than others that are almost an exhibition space themselves. And I know you'd had some experience, but what are your thoughts on that really entry-level sort of way of exhibiting?
You've taken me back 20 years ago, and that's how I first exhibited my work. I'd forgotten altogether. I had a cafe that I approached in Elwood in Victoria, right up near town. Had a relationship with that person, so to speak, working relationship. They were happy to exhibit my work. I had an opening night, spent $1,200 on booze, shouted at everyone drinks, don't know why. Oh my God. Cost me a lot, as well as obviously printing all the work, etc., etc. I did sell a few pieces, which was nice, to my friends, etc. But I don't know, I can't remember that I sold much more. And I'm with you, Nick. I'm so pleased you brought this topic up, because it is often a way that somebody is approached. If you sort of tell somebody you're an artist, the next thing you know, they're either the cafe owner or they know the cafe owner, and they're encouraging you to go down there and have your work on their walls. And yes, you're helping out the cafe because you are actually there putting the artwork on the walls because they need something. I think it depends on how well it is lit, to how well it's promoted, so to speak. So, you know, more often than not, you're quite right, Nick, people don't know that the artwork on the wall is actually for sale. So my negotiation would be, can I put some big kick-ass, captions next to this art with a clear price tag so that people actually know it is for sale? I think that's a blinding flash of the obvious. I don't know many people that have had much success at having that cafe approach, but I could see it could be successful, but it's one of those things that you're never going to be able to tell unless the cafe approaches you and says, we do monthly exhibitions here. They treat it like a cafe/gallery, and they say, every time we have something up on the walls here, somebody sells at least 3 pieces, where you could probably go, okay, great. Well, I'm pretty much guaranteed I'm going to sell 3 of my artworks. That's fantastic. There are cafes sort of more geared towards that in places, but the non-negotiable for me would have a big kick-ass price tag on there, so at least people know that this stuff is for sale, as opposed to, this is the first time I've been to this cafe and, oh, that's lovely art, not realizing that it is for sale. They may well just think it's just decorative.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's all negative in any sense, but yeah, I think you have to be very mindful as a new photographer or a new exhibitor that the arrangement that you're entering into might be a bit one-sided. They might be getting more out of it than you are. You're paying for the stuff to be printed and the stuff to be framed. They're getting free art, and you may not get any return on that investment. And it may be that it sits there and does absolutely nothing. So it's worthwhile considering before you enter into that arrangement. There are other ways of doing it where you may actually sell the work to the cafe and then allow them to sell it from the walls. If they're that confident that they'll sell things from the walls, you might say, well, okay, well, you pay for the framing and the printing and we'll put it up there, and then you sell it and you get all the profit, or you get the framing and printing costs back and another 20% on top of that, and I just get 20% total or something like that. So you can come up with other ideas that doesn't put you in a position where you're forking out a lot of money for something that might not go anywhere, so if you have a think about those things. And look, I was approached by a cafe once, I remember, and I actually had done it before and I wasn't really interested in it. And I suggested a couple of different arrangements along those lines, and lo and behold, they got someone else. So, they weren't interested in forking out any money for what was going on the wall at all. But I'm sure there are some cafe owners that would be more than willing to put their money where their mouth is and make it more of a 50-50 arrangement rather than something that's a bit more lopsided to them just getting pretty pictures on the wall.
Next, I actually just in the background put a whole bunch of photos together of venues that I've exhibited in, which might be good to just bounce off some ideas from if you guys are open to that.
Yeah. Turn it on, mate.
We talked about lighting. We talked about space. It'll have a relevance.
We'll just see what Tom had to say too, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, while you're
it'll
just
all
getting
come
that-
out when I show the photos. But yeah.
Yeah, when you show the photos, Paul, and I'll talk over the top of that as well, because just the one thing I wanted to say,
You go first,
to continue on with Nick's conversation, was that I think absolutely, if you're looking to print a fair bit of work and you're thinking financially you can't do it, you can always ask the gallery or the cafe owner to contribute. And I think the other thing, I mentored some photographers here in Melbourne last year that exhibited a gallery, and I'm going to mention them because she's a good friend of mine, and it's an opportunity for other people perhaps watching to be involved. It's called Glimmer Gallery in Caulfield here in Melbourne. She's a photographer herself who runs it, but then also too, the space is available to hire. Now, so I always say, I said to these guys who are exhibiting, I said, don't print anything that you wouldn't want to have hanging on your walls yourself. And that's good, A, from a point of view of choosing the art, but B, presume that you're not going to sell anything. So at the end of the day, if you don't end up, well, it's true. It's true. It's not guaranteed that you're going to sell anything. So I say to them, if you don't want to have it hanging on your walls at home, don't bother printing it for the exhibition, because at the end of the day, it may well be that you don't sell anything from your exhibition, and therefore, where's it going to go? It's going to go on your
Or at the
walls
very
home.
least, it's very rare that anybody fully sells out a show. So you're going to be ending up with a bunch of the artwork regardless.
It's going to be very
Fairly
rare
likely.
that somebody, it's going to be very rare that somebody sells anything exhibiting their work. I think that's just the practicalities of it. I think you have to go in with this zero-sum approach that, like, at the end of the day, it's going to be great to exhibit my work and it's going to be a little feather in my cap or tick that box, but you do very well to sell anything at the end of the day. And I don't mean to be negative. I just think that's the realities of the situation. I mean, shit, I get
That's interesting coming from a man who's sitting in his own gallery.
I know, that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, like, I get probably 1,000 people that come through this gallery, you know, per week in the summer, and I might get no one who buys it. You know, it's got to be the right piece of art that they want to buy. There's got to be in the market for buying art, like ready to buy at that time. They've got to like the work. They've got to like the price. They've got to like you. There's so many factors that need to go right for you in order for somebody to then go, yeah, actually, I do want to buy that. So I hate to be, negative Nancy, but I think it's just practical.
Well, I think it's important to have your expectations. I mean, Chris kind of mentioned that just before the show, actually sent me a message and said that's something we want to, we should touch on during the show. Do you want to touch on that now, Chris, in terms of like expectations?
No, look, I think Tom nailed it. I would expect to sell nothing and be happy with selling something. I guess, you know, it's not when it's a difficult one, because I guess as you do more and more, then you have bigger expectations. So, but certainly, you know, I would be really disappointed if I had an exhibition that didn't sell anything. But, you know, I fully walk away expecting, you know, to come back with 50% of what goes up on the wall. Yeah. And I'm running out of space at home to put prints up. So you sort of, I completely agree with what Tom said on that. You know, set yourself a low bar, but set yourself a target and go for it. And, you know, if you're not exhibiting in a commercial space, I would completely say, you don't expect to sell anything. You know, unless a gallery is actually out there promoting your stuff, it's very unlikely someone's going to walk in and go, that's the piece I want, and I'm prepared to pay that price for it, basically.
It was segueing into another practicality and potential limitation, and this is one I've seen myself, where you frame your work. So you print, matte, and frame the work in the style that it might be a style that you keep for the whole exhibition. So all the frames are white frames with white mattes, or black frames with white mattes, or whatever. But I've seen this happen where, and I've had it happen to me, where they love the print and they could buy it straight off the wall right there, put a red sticker on it, it's sold, and they go, I want the same size, but I want a different frame. And then suddenly you've still got the same work that you've already invested in framing costs and all that sort of thing. But then you've got to go and print it again and frame it again. And sure, you'll get the profit from that, but you've still got the original work on the wall unsold. What are your thoughts on, this is a big question, but what are your thoughts on framed versus unframed and leaving that decision to the buyer as to how they should frame it and again, the practicalities and logistics of framing itself?
Huge one.
I'll have a go at answering that, Nick. I'm a big advocate for going with no frames because it's a lot less barriers to entry because obviously it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot more practical from a logistics point of view. If you sell that print, well, you roll it up, put it in a tube, and off it goes. You don't have the additional costs of trying to transport that because it's obviously very sensitive when you're trying to move a frame piece when glass is involved. It just really, all the costs increase, not only in framing it initially, but also in transporting it. So big advocate for keeping it simple, reducing your liability or your financial commitment, making it easier from a logistics fulfillment point of view. But also, if you're going to then look at exhibiting other places, potentially other cities around Australia, well then it becomes far easier to just roll those prints up, put it in the tube, and away it goes to the next city. Taking a step back from just rolled prints that are hanging with some weights, the next step down I would be looking at is to get them mounted onto some like capper board, about 20 mil or 10 mil at the least.
Is that like foam core sort of thing?
Yeah,
it's
that's
kind of a really
exactly
stiff
right.
sort of form of foam core. It's kind of what we use for our light collective exhibitions all around the country. So with Rick, basically, you can use the paper like, I mean, this is Chris's lovely print behind me, which I love, by the way. But we basically have a larger border around the paper, just literally on the same print we're printing on. So there's no mounting involved. You get a block of say 10 or 20 mil, and it's quite stiff. It's not super cheap, but it's actually quite light, but it's really stiff. If you just use foam on a large print, it tends to bow and move.
Yeah.
And when Rick's talking about setting it around the country, you can sandwich these things together with a filler in between them and just get like 6 prints in a space this big. And we got some custom boxes made for some of them to be able to send around the country and store. The weight is about 1/3 of framing as well in terms of transport and movement and the physical space it needs. So there's different options to explore around that guard. But Tom, I think it's in a different situation. Like, I don't know, Tom, if you think people will take your work seriously in a gallery if it's not presented in its finished form. So I guess that's another part of the argument that'd be good to listen to.
I've got a great experience or example of this. One year I loved the idea of doing a exhibition in this gallery where it was going to be unframed. So it was a Lake Air exhibition actually, and I had 12, 13 large format prints. So what we're talking is at least 150 centimeters on the longer side by 120 centimeters. And the largest print we had was almost 2 meters high by 120 across. I got them printed on this beautiful fine art, Hannah Mule Canson sort of type paper. And we literally magnetized them to the wall. So we actually stuck magnets to the wall, and then we had those little magnet bolts that hold them in. Yeah. And look, we could have hung them from a frigging, fishing line or whatever. But I just wanted to do that just because I love that idea from the aesthetics point of view. And we sold 3 prints at $8,000 each. So we sold $24,000 in the space of about, was probably hanging for a month or two. And nobody sort of thought twice about those 3. There were 2 buyers. One lady bought 2, and the other gentleman bought 1. And they never questioned whether or not it was going to look any good once we got it framed for them. We actually exhibited it with the idea that we would sell it framed. So that was a framed price, but we exhibited everything unframed. Gotcha. And we did actually, I think we did actually have one on display that was framed. So we could say, look, it's going to be framed exactly like this, but for the moment, as you can see, your print is unframed. And they loved it, and it worked very well for me. So I'm a big advocate for doing that. Yep. If I was to suggest to anyone, if they were going to be doing that type of exhibiting, the bigger the better. Obviously, a smaller frame print hanging on a wall or hanging from fishing line or whatever else it might be is not going to look as sexy as something that's big and impressive. That's all.
We've actually had a question about that on YouTube in terms of from Doug Porter, just asking about, is it viable to exhibit the large format imagery, or should the prints be of a more moderate size? And so what's the sort of the economics around that?
Well, they're a lot better
Chris,
when they're
I just saw
unframed.
your new latest exhibition being printed, and they are not small.
No, look, and this is a personal thing, but I take images to print them big. That's the end goal is not to produce an A4 print. It's to produce something 1 meter plus. And so to me, when I do an exhibition, there's no discussion about it. That's what goes up. They're 44-inch minimum size prints, and because that's what makes me happy. And
that's 1.2 meters, by the way.
But the economics of it are quite so. Doug, it's a good question, and look, I love your work, and certainly I'd love to see some of that really big. So there's a couple of economic ways of doing it, and I think Tom's touched on a few there. So the real cost isn't in the printing. The big costs are in the mounting or the framing or whatever, however you choose to present it. So if you do what Tom suggested, that's one way. Magnetize it, stick it to a wall. That works great. The other option is use some battens across the top and the bottom of your prints, and that effectively gives you flattens out the image a bit, and you can make it pretty neutral, so it doesn't you're literally then just got the print that people can take away and frame up, and that's literally a case of going to Bunnings, buying some timber and painting it white, and buying some screws and and doing it together. And the last couple of exhibitions that myself and Chris Dark have done, we've used that technique. The other approach, and Tom, apologies if I've got it wrong, but it looks like the print behind you is a canvas with a stretch canvas with a
shadow box frame.
A box frame around it,
which is the way that we sell all of our canvas here. I never thought that I actually sell as much canvas as we do, and it sells well because that's what people want. But we never sell it without that shadow box frame. It comes in raw oak, black, and white.
Yeah, but that's a pretty economic way of producing big art as well. So
it's quite forgiving to produce your work on a larger size if you're worried about coming from a smaller file size in the first place. You can be a little bit more confident going larger on the canvas surface because it's quite forgiving in terms of detail.
You can. So I think Chris will probably answer this. My dog's getting in the way. My printer prints, the guys who do this for me printed 100 DPI rather than 300 DPI. So yes, you're right, Paul. At the end of the day, you can take a smaller file, or you could have cropped in on your photo and it's perhaps not going to blow up as big under a frame. So therefore you can print it in canvas, much bigger size than otherwise. But also too, from an economics point of view, the guys who do this, Brilliant Prints up in Queensland, they do a brilliant job. I've been using them since day one, and they're using 100% cotton canvas. It's the best quality canvas you can buy. But something like that storm print that you can see there is 150 centimeters wide by 120 centimeters high, and framed costs me around about $600. And so that's quite a bit of money for anyone who might be wanting to print, 4 or 5 or 10 for an exhibition. Doesn't need to be that big, but it's certainly far cheaper than getting it framed and printed, that's for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm glad we covered that one, because I think it's a big one for people about the framing costs, and it's good to know that you can do it more economically, but it's also, we've obviously talked about the presentation of unframed prints that Chris just did, particularly, and Rick. It has to still look good. So I've been to some exhibitions. I've been in some exhibitions where there've been a group exhibition on a wide theme, a wider theme, and some of the presentation of the unframed prints was really subpar. So they didn't look good at all. There wasn't a lot of care taken in the way that they were presented on the wall. And as a result, it just looked shabby. So if you don't take care and you don't think about the lighting that's there and the way you're going to mount them so it's clean.
Yeah, and I guess it would roll up too if you don't have it mounted correctly. The paper could do all sorts of things in the humidity and that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think mounting them some way is a good idea just to keep them straight and you know it's going to hang well and you've got mounting points. But if you've got just bare prints and you're doing the magnet bolts, which is a really good way of doing it, handle your prints with gloves. Yeah. With gloves. Do not touch them with your bare hands, because every single touch that you make, even if your hands you think are as clean as, on the edges you're going to start getting little dirt smudges and that sort of thing, and it looks really, really shabby under exhibition lighting. Any imperfections on the side of the paper will show up really easily. Any creases, any dog ears, anything like that. So if you are going to go down that route, and I reckon, I think the general consensus here is that it's a great way of doing it, just be really, really careful with your presentation and keep your high standards, and then you'll end up with a good-looking exhibition that's economical.
And another one too, in terms of that, if you're going to be presenting work that way, it is pretty well unprotected. So I'd imagine that you have to assume that there's going to be a little bit of attrition in terms of the prints as well. You're not probably going to get them all back in pristine condition. So that's probably another consideration.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Look, I've done it quite a few times. I've done it with pins, I've done it with magnets, I've done it at small size, done it with large size. And I would probably say with conviction, almost every single print has ended up getting damaged in some way. And so you either commit to the cheaper outlay of just presenting it unframed and recognizing that you might end up with a whole bunch of prints with tatty corners or holes from things or creases from magnets, and sell it as a separate print relative to what's on the wall, and accept the sort of physical cost up front that you might be losing to present it. That's probably, depending on how pedantic you are, that's been my realistic experience with presenting that way, is that print is pretty much not going to be necessarily saleable, depending on how fussy your client is.
You have to assume it's a write-off from the start in that sense.
Well, it's fairly likely. I mean, Chris is nodding his head as well. I don't know. Tom, did you produce different prints from the ones you had on the wall?
You're so right, Paul. We had a few there that got that magnet sort of, crease, tattered edges, rolling them up, storing them incorrectly. I'm terrible at that stuff. Mary's here and she's nodding her head.
Hey, Mary.
Look, it wasn't the best, so it is a downside. You have to really be careful. Nick is correct. Put gloves on, roll them up properly, make sure they're stored properly, or as you handle them, etc. It's the whole reason when we sell unframed prints, which we don't often like doing, I say to them, don't unwrap this until you take it to a framer and get it framed, because the more times that you handle it, the more chance it has of getting damaged. So yes, there was a bit of attrition, absolutely, from that Lake Air exhibition that we did.
One way around it is you print it with quite a big border, and you can potentially sell it by cutting that border away.
Correct. Yep, that's a great.
And then that way,
idea.
the tattered corners and the pinholes or whatever, or the crease marks from the magnets are not a part of it. So, but I just say some people spray prints. That's another thing. It doesn't do a lot, but there's Hahnemuhle and a few different organizations, companies that produce sprays that they don't necessarily protect it from physical damage, but if a fly lands on it and craps on it, you can kind of wipe a little bit off. So that's a small level of protection. For the
have you seen the video when Ken Duncan's spraying the print down in his driveway?
Yeah, like I've done it. It can affect the level of contrast intensity of the print. So you want to practice that if you're going to do it, especially to a big print with a lot of negative space. But that sort of creates a slightly protective film over it. And if you're using really, really sensitive, like smooth matte papers with lots of blacks or something, you're asking for trouble if they're unprotected. But I might just give us a quiet breather from our lovely faces, and just in the background, I haven't got anything classy, but I've got images from various exhibitions that we can talk to, I think, in terms of lighting, physical space, print sizes, different forms. And if you guys are up for it, I'll just chuck it up and you guys can kind of decide for yourself what's sort of relevant. So I'm just thinking ahead to that conversation with where's some of the prints from? Oh, so here's the Men with Heart prints. So that's an exhibition I've had. Oh, I think we've had about 7,000 people through it now around the country. And you'll notice, like, I went pretty grassroots here. This was a space that didn't have any physical capacity to hang. You weren't allowed to, but it's an incredible space right in downtown Hobart with incredible lighting. So because it was about men, we were like, you know what, let's do something pretty blokey. And we literally just got this wide fencing and hung them off that. And people loved it.
Wow.
Because it was about the work, you know. Nick's just, you know, you think, but it worked. But
Mate, every burnt down house gets that temporary fencing put around it, mate. So it's
Nick's got a different.
at least you got a clean looking one.
My point wasn't about the fencing, which I forgot was even there. It was this print is framed, but we framed it without glass, and we sprayed the prints. And they've been through 6 exhibitions now over like 3.5 years, and I haven't replaced one yet. And so by having the framing, it's quite light framing, it's protected the corners, and it gives it a little bit of physical depth, a way that the face of the print isn't like there to be accessed by a brush pass. You're more likely to hit the edge of the frame first. So it's created a lot of longevity for the prints, and they're actually really, really light. They're just a light foam core behind and an easy hanging process. So that was
What's the material, Paul, of the actual frame?
It's a light wood.
Okay.
I had it done here in Hobart. And we, you know, because it was quite a causal orientated exhibition, and Ilford was just looking to get some ground in Tasmania as a company and feeling around, they actually sponsored the whole exhibition. So they pay for all the paper, for instance. And then because it was sort of causal, and we got a grant that covered all the physical costs of the space here, just through like a Tas Arts grant. And we basically got around a lot of the physical costs by just being clever and getting communities involved. And, you know, we've got branding out the front for the people that have supported us. And it sort of ended up working really, really well. So one of the things is we'll touch on a little bit later, but marketing is sort of a part of it. But you can see like this space is downtown Hobart, absolutely prime time. And it's probably got the best foot traffic of any single space in Hobart, arguably.
Amazing spot, yeah.
And it's glass on all sides. It's super, super bright, super, super light. And, you know, but some of these spaces, you've got to realize you might have to book it 2 years in advance. You don't just get to rock up and just sort of do what you like. Here's an example of a much, much bigger space. We got the same exhibition in the TMAG Museum for 3 months, I think, you know. And this is the advantage sometimes of having a cause or a community sort of orientated exhibition. There's all of a sudden, all these resources are available to you through government organizations and other grants where they're actually bound to support artists. And so you can get around that by, you're not necessarily making the commercial sales, but your costs are basically zero. So to have this in a museum for 3 months, like, oh my God, imagine the cost of what that would be commercially to have a space like that. And, you know, again, sort of having that little bit of branding. And I think, you know, story is really important. We touched on it earlier, and I'll just run into it now quickly. Is I've got a few fine art reps that represent my work. And I think the beauty of having a physical exhibition is you can tell people the backstory. It imbues value, it creates understanding, it builds relationship. You can speak to the work itself. But I think that connection with you is really what imbues a lot of value for the people that are looking at investing in your work. So if you can't be there in person, you know, there's little things you can do. Like for my art reps, I actually write like a 2 or 3 paragraph story about every single image. And I make it really personal and really intimate and very, very specific to that image, that they can get a sense of the effort and the energy and the vision that went into creating it. And it imbues a sense of value. So that's something I think worth considering about how you can incorporate that sort of into an exhibition. You know, openings are pretty crucial. Like, I don't know what you guys feel. Sometimes I've pushed really hard to get a special person to do the opening, and sometimes it's gone well, and sometimes it's been absolute rubbish. Like I remember we got
wears the masks at the moment, but
yeah, I mean, you know, the limitation at the moment is 50. We'll talk about that at the end. But as a principle, hoping the world's going to get better. Like, I mean, it wasn't too hard to think having Bob Brown open the show wasn't going to be a good thing. He's one of the best orators that I've met in the world. But we had the Tasmanian photographer, Tasmanian of the Year come to open the show. And we did that because we thought that would help with numbers and so on. And he just spoke absolute rubbish, didn't understand the work at all. And I just wanted to shoo him out of the room, you know. So it's kind of like, And when I first exhibited, I was told really clearly, oh, no, the artist is not meant to open the show. You got to get someone else to open it. And I watched 3 people over 3 years just do what I thought was a pretty crap job of opening the show relative to what I could have done because of the level of understanding and relationship with the work. So I don't know what you guys think.
I think the best one I
but,
saw was the opening that you had, Paul, and it was actually a politician that did quite a good job at the centre in town.
Yeah, that was the
Rockcliffe,
minister for
actually did
minister
quite
for
a good
health.
job.
Yeah.
So it's
so that was interesting in that, you know, this guy, he was a full-on politician, career politician, 18 years. He's used to turning up to these things and just, you know, he'd written a speech 3 days beforehand, but then he came in and looked at the work the day before, and there was about 3 speeches before his that were really powerful, very heart-based, and very, very personal. And he actually threw his speech away. He was so moved by the power of the work and what people had shared before him that he just threw it. And he ended up just speaking straight off the cuff about his personal story as a man, a lot of his challenges. And it was actually watching the power of an image transform somebody who was actually the presenter. It was quite amazing. I'd never seen anything like it. And part of that transformation was we had some of the community involved. So I think it's really important personally that if you can, to honor the Indigenous people on the land that you're presenting in is really important. And in this case, I'd done so much work with the community over so many years. I actually got rung up by Craig Everett, who's one of the great bastions for Indigenous understanding and crossing bridges with community. He asked me if he could open the exhibition. I was like, well, I'm just some white dude, what are you asking me for? And he did, and he brought this whole mob, and it created this huge space, and we had smoking ceremonies and dancing, and
it was fantastic.
And it was pretty special. And so that was part of that transformation. You can use music as part of that transformational aspect. You can build up through the framing of building up before it opens in terms of things. Thinking of things that add meaning and purpose is in your own personal way, I think is really a really beautifully significant thing to do. I'll never forget that, Lukey. That was just, that was so special. Oh, there's Lukey boy. There you go. Here's an example of a simple exhibition. This is a sky, everyone. This is setting up. So this is quite common that you'll come across in terms of a more legitimate gallery space. They'll have rails that you can slide these along, and they have hooks that are adjustable by height. And you'll see the physical gallery lighting on the top, which you can actually move around to spotlight certain pieces. So that's kind of a bit of an ideal in terms of the kind of lighting that you might be aiming for. Like Tom would have spent a long time organizing his lighting in his gallery, I'm sure, and making the most of showpieces when you get natural light and that kind of thing. You can see that combination of natural light and spotlight here. Often they have different temperatures. Like in APA, for instance, these prints are mainly APA prints. And in APA, the Australian Professional Photography Awards, they're designed to be judged under really, really bright lights. So I almost needed to exhibit these prints with spotlighting on them, or they would have been a little bit dull. So sometimes how I create a print is very specific to where I know it's going to be presented. And if you're really, really pedantic, particularly somewhere like Tom, where you know and you can control the lighting in the space you're going to be in, you can print the density of the prints to kind of suit. Tom, I'm going to stop rambling for a second. Do you have any thoughts about that? And like, how much did you prepare your stuff for knowing the kind of lighting conditions that it's going to be in, or how much did you control the lighting to bring out best in the prints?
Yeah, I can control that myself by how many spots I have on the artwork here at the gallery. And there's it's a really interesting point you've brought up, that I've actually turned some of the spotlights off in the gallery because I've created a space around the corner here, which is quite dark, and there was actually too many lights on the photo on one or two of the artworks myself. They're forest images, and they've got more mood and atmosphere, and I want them to be quite dark, and therefore that's I've controlled the lighting in that particular way. There's this other one here behind me, this side, that one there. Where am I going? There, which is quite a dark printer, really printed quite dark in the foreground. So I've actually had to put a bit more light on that. So I'm fortunate that I can control that, but it's certainly a consideration, that's for sure.
Like, one other aspect here when we're talking about framing and not framing, do you remember we had a lot of discussions, Ricardo, about how we're going to present our work? So here we've done exactly that. We've got 10 mil gator board, which is kind of that stiff, reasonably thick, but really light, but reasonably robust surface. And it actually does have little edging around the outside that gets put on, so you don't see the inside core of the foam, but that can peel off over time. And we've used the actual whites around the border as the actual frames for the prints. But we made a point of actually framing a few, so people get a physical sense of what it can look like if they choose to invest in a larger print. And I think there's a certain psychology to that I'm sure Tom could attest to, that that's significant. If people have an idea and a physical representation of how they can see a print in its final form, like even purely from a size point of view, like all the work in here is only kind of A3, A2, but I wanted to have a few showstoppers in there, and also made the prints available at all those larger sizes. And here's the one example where you can see how it's going to look if you choose to go that big. So people can translate that into reality. And I literally sold a print this size last night. And I think part of that was because I walked them up to this print, and we talked about the impact of size and the space that they physically wanted to put it in. And again, I've done that here just with using the paper as the border and with a 10 mil kind of foam core around the back. And that probably is saleable as it is. That can go straight into a frame as it is. And I've just got a little light easel here, very transportable, very easy to get around, no issues with glass. But Loki's got their point. There is a certain vulnerability in a print presented like that. Some little kid comes in and bumps into it, or somebody pokes a finger at it, and it's not going to look too good. So there are some certain papers that are more robust. So one conversation might be nice to have is, what papers do people print on and why? Chris, I know you've got a lot of favorites. And there's
one way of saying I don't have a favourite.
It'd be interesting to just chat about that.
Look, I guess as a standard stock paper for an exhibition, I don't think you can go too far wrong with like a Canson edition etching or something like that. Some prints require or benefit from something a bit special, and there's a few very specialist papers out there I use, like torch on, but that doesn't work with everything. And also photo rag satin, but again, that doesn't work with everything. So you sort of need to pick your paper based on what your image is. But just keep it simple. To be honest, Paul. And most people are going to, unless you're printing yourself, then most people are going to go to a print house, get them to print them, mount them, and ship them up to them, sort of thing. So while you're talking, Chris, this is a physical video I did of the actual prints, and if you look closely, you can see a little bit of the variation in the type of papers, from a smooth cotton rag to a warm kind of fiber-based paper for a warmish kind of print, to a crisper, more high contrasty sort of paper for a high sort of dramatic kind of print. So there is a lot to be learnt and shared and experienced in terms of, this is a highly textured paper called William Turner, and you can see the ridges of the paper through the negative space that's coming through the prints. See the dimensionality in this print, how amazing that can be. Like, this is something that's hard to translate into reality as a JPEG on a screen. And so I was trying to think, this is a metallic paper actually, but it actually has a texture finish. You can see that little bit of sheen there. And again, we decided, as Chris often does too, let's suit the image to the paper choice. This is a metallic finish one as well. And there's probably a little bit more cost involved in terms of getting a variety of papers as opposed to buying one roll and doing them all the same. But not all images suit the same sort of papers. It's just as simple as that. So it's kind of something to be quite conscious of and have a bit of fun playing around with. You can buy sample packs from certain companies which have a range of different papers.
It's a whole nother episode. We're trying to try and get Les Walker or somebody in terms of color management, because that's, as Chris would, and everyone probably here will well know, that's a vortex in itself.
We've had a couple other questions too, Paul, about venues. Tim Rate asks, how do you actually go about finding the physical spaces themselves? Do you sort of pound the pavement or check Google, or is there some sort of ideas you already have just from what other people have used in the past? Is there any sort of method to that madness there?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's lots of different ways to explore it. You can be really cold and clinical and start physically looking up art galleries in the area that you're in. You can look at community spaces for hire. You can approach people that have exhibited before and ring them out of it. Like I know for Head On, for instance, when you apply to exhibit at Head On, they will give you a physical list of like 150 or even venues potentially that you can approach. That's the same in the Ballarat Biennale and Ballarat. They'll actually supply and give a suggestion of a whole bunch of venues. But what you'll find, it's pretty hard to translate a website or a piece of paper into the reality of what's going to suit you. So if you can, you really want to get in there physically and get a sense before you commit to a space of what you've got on your hands. And as we all know, as photographers, you can present something in a certain light, and reality might not be the same when you walk in the door. You're not always going to get a lot of control. And Ricardo might be able to speak to this a little bit. Like we've exhibited in, 5 or 6 different galleries, and every single one has its pros and cons. Some is about accessibility, some is about the lighting, some is about the physical space that you have, some is about the rules that they have. Like I know in one gallery, they were like, oh, we can't be open after 7:30. And it's kind of like, or 7:15 or something ridiculous. And we were like, it's Friday night in town and people can't get there till 6 or 6:30. And, there's different sort of pros and cons to every venue, depending on how you want to run things. Like the exhibition I've got at the moment is, if I go through a pro and cons list, it's a community space. So it's low cost and low, what do you call it? When the low commission. But they've actually got exhibition lighting and they have a funding base where they will actually do all the posters for you and do a lot of promotion for you. They have their own email list as well. But there might be a yoga class in there tomorrow, or an art class, or something else like in the middle of the exhibition. So it actually is a communal space. And in this case, I actually really like that. I love the idea of people that wouldn't otherwise go to the exhibition all of a sudden get exposed to it. And one of the ways that I've decided to get around that, rather than me being there all the time, because it's a community space, is I'll create targeted events. And before we finish the show, I want to go into that with Chris, because we had a chat about this, is you're not necessarily spending your best time sitting there all day waiting for people to come in. But if you have a talk or a virtual walkthrough, or you create targeted visiting hours where you lock people in or groups to come in at certain times, then you're really getting bang for the buck for the amount of time you've got physically in the space.
I was going to ask about that just in terms of venue selection, and obviously massive consideration is how it's staffed or access for
Very
people,
so.
or who's actually looking after the space, and if someone wants to buy, what do they actually do if there's no one there, and that kind of thing. And I guess it's just a matter of gauging that against what you're trying to achieve. I don't think there's any right or wrong answers in that space.
Yeah, I've done all of the above. I think we've had work in the top of most high-end galleries in the country, and we literally had people kind of walk in there as a test. And there's some lady sitting at the back desk, then they're in there for 40 minutes and they don't look up, say a word, or even talk to you. And then they walk out. And it's kind of like, we're paying, $2,000 a week for this gallery space, which is supposedly the best of the best. And our experience with the Light Collective, the very first exhibition we had, I don't know if Rick's here or he's bumped off, is we manned it completely ourselves from beginning to finish. Every single day. We had no curators. We had no gallery people. We did it all ourselves, and that was our most successful show by a country mile. And since then, we've had 5 or 6 exhibitions in some of the top galleries in Melbourne City and Brisbane, and the sales have been maybe a quarter of what we did when we manned it ourselves.
I don't think there's going to be any substitute for having the actual artist there to speak for their work in that regard. So I guess it depends on how much commitment you really have to, or available time to do that.
You need to have somebody vested in the outcome. as you are, and there's nobody who's going to be more invested in the outcome of the work than the artists themselves.
But also,
So,
you can explain what's going on and really help to tell the story. And I'm sure that's something that Tom is extremely good at with his artwork, and really helps to help people understand why it's something.
Tom, how do you keep fresh with that? Like, if I was doing that day in, day out, talking about the same prints, I'd probably go nana. How do you keep that enthusiasm and freshness to engage people with your work? And
I don't find it particularly difficult. There's some days more than others where I'm more enthusiastic, I guess you'd say. But not everybody who comes into the gallery wants to know the story behind every single print, for example.
Yeah.
But there's stories that I'll tell, and they're often the same stories, but I don't mind telling them 1,000 times over because I'm passionate about the work and what I do. So I think if you've got that passion, you don't need to fake it. You don't need to. You don't get tired of telling the story because it's
you do rotate prints too, though, quite a bit, don't you? So
I do. Yeah, I've got about
fresh
60 artworks now available, which is probably the most we've ever had. So we've got 25 here in the gallery and about another 35 out in storage there. So we do rotate regularly for the purpose of we do have regulars that come into the gallery as well. So at the end of the day, I say to people, look, have you been in the gallery before? And then I say, well, please do come back because you're sure to see something different. We've got 2,500 artworks available on the website to purchase, and we've got to maybe get all of them on the wall at some stage.
Yeah, Tom told me that last night. I couldn't believe it. I don't know anyone in the world that's got that many artworks available on the website.
Well, it's probably too many, but we could probably put up double, if not 3 times that as much as well with all of my stuff in the archives, but you've got to stop somewhere. But I think I certainly agree with this conversation that at the end of the day, we've had staff to staff this for weeks on end when I've been running workshops and not sold anything. So I don't think that's anything to do with their skills as in sales. I think it's more just the fact that I think people like buying from the artist, absolutely. But I think also too, they love hearing that story behind the art and your motivation and what it means to you and how you came about capturing this image in the first place.
Because that's exactly what they're going to tell people that come to their house.
Absolutely. Well. So this is a perfect point, Luke. You're right on it here. At the end of the day, if somebody walks into a house that's got a brilliant piece of art on the wall, they're generally going to go, wow, where is that and who took it? Okay, so the owner will no doubt want to say, oh my God, well, we walked into this gallery down Main Street, Mornington. There's a really nice guy there. He's very young, attractive. His name's Tom, and he took this beautiful piece of art, and they tell the story, and they regurgitate my story behind it. You know what I mean? One thing I don't do very well is actually, printing out and pasting that story onto the back of the art so that they can then take it off the wall every now and again and read it. I do certainly, I take a point of, we offer a service here at the gallery, which wouldn't hurt for anyone exhibiting their own work to do the same thing. Once they purchase, it's actually free delivery and installation. And when I deliver it and install it for them, I actually sign the print in front of them, certainly on the back.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I think that's a bit, it's a bit of a wank. But at the end of the day, I think people love it. I say to them, look, purposely, I say, look, I don't sign this before it comes to you because I like the idea of you seeing me actually sign this, and on the back I actually write the title of the print and as many details as possible that I can remember, when it was taken, the year, if not the month, even if I can remember that. Sometimes they're 10 years ago, so I struggle, but also to sign the back of the print as well as the front. And then I also put my web address. And I do that because I know that web address is not going to change. If I put the gallery or the phone number, that may well change in years to come, and they might take it off the wall and go, actually, I liked another one of that guy's print. Who took it again? And, what's his details? And, you take the print off the wall and you have a look on the back, right?
And do you also give guidance in terms of how they light that in their home as well? Doug?
Yeah, I do. It's often a question that comes before they actually purchase the artwork, where they'll say, well, look, you've got gallery lighting in here, but we've got, this type of home. So what would you recommend for us? Sometimes we'll do a pre-home consultation before they actually commit to the art. So I'll go and see their space anyway. And I'll say, look, at the end of the day, yeah, that's pretty dark there. And what you're seeing in the gallery, it's well lit. So why don't you just ring my electrician and get him to come over and put a spotlight in there, and that'll be perfect. Or they may have those downlights that you can, angle and direct onto their art, etc. Most homes that I find in this area, they're modern light filmed, they're well lit, so we don't have much of that problem. What else? I was going to say something else around that as well. We also, because we're a commercial gallery and we have 4 different finishes to our artwork, we have frame prints, metal prints, acrylic prints, and canvas prints. We actually, one of the first questions I'll ask somebody in selling the art is, where's it going to hang? And when you stand looking at that wall, what's immediately behind you? Because if it's windows, lots of reflection is going to come off the acrylic, the framed, and the metal prints. So therefore the canvas is generally the only option that we can sell them. We've learned that the hard way. We've supplied some art to some people without asking that question, and that's been a problem. So I hope that adds some value.
Yeah, that's
definitely
a very important bit of advice. I'm going to jump in, guys, because Chris has got to go, and I really wanted him to chat about something in particular that we had to chat about last night. I think it's particularly relevant right now, given the COVID climate. Like, if you're not physically, you're going to have issues with the physicality of getting people into your gallery. And I might even act on this while my exhibition's still up, is how can we get around that? And one of the ways you could potentially do that is through virtual presentations of the work. And Chris has been experimenting and exploring a bit at the moment, and he's settling on giving that a bit of a crack. Do you want to speak to that, Chris, what you've come up with so far and why you're motivated to do that?
Yeah, I guess I've got a lot of friends over East who can't get over to WA at the moment. So, there was a lot of feedback, looks like a great exhibition, would love to have been there. But, we've got family and friends back in the UK who physically can't see what we're doing. So, I suppose it was driven by that. But then, as I was saying to you the other night, Paul, there's a difference between having a website of individual images, that you can flick between to being able to see all the images in a 3D space. So really what I was looking for was being able to present all the pieces in the exhibition in a space, albeit virtually, and try and share that. And look, there's, I guess the good news is through COVID, museums and exhibitions across the world have been grappling with that challenge. And I guess over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of solutions that have popped up. Some of them are very high end, so some of them you go online and Google, and they're sort of 10, 20 grand for a year's license to go and do something like that. And clearly that's not probably the space we're all in right now. But there's a tier below that where you can start to get into the 10, 20 US dollar bucks a month and actually have a 3D space that you can present in, and they're web-based. The web-based tools you curate in those web-based environments. And so that's what I'm playing with at the moment. And there's a few, I'm sure there's more than I'll mention now, but the 2 main ones that I've had a play with over the last few weeks are Art Placer, and the other one is something a bit of a ignore my German pronunciation, but it's a Kunst Matrix, Kunst Matrix.
One word.
Yeah, one word. And look, I encourage people, if you're interested in this, go and check those out. They both offer sort of free trials or trials of one or another, but essentially they allow you to hang your work in a 3D space, and a bit like a 3D game on your screen, you can scroll around and use your mouse to move around.
Yeah, I might sorry to interrupt, Chris, but Rick has shared a brilliant link of a actual photographer that's doing this on their website.
Cool.
And it might be better to see it visually. So the photographer is Jimmy Nelson, and so this is his website, and so you can just enter the exhibition as it is. I think it's just got a bit of an explanation of what to do, and then you basically got these controls that you can use to navigate around the virtual exhibition. And I believe maybe I didn't read so it's got a detail view. It's actually got a narration over each of the over each of the pictures.
Audio
too,
narration.
so-
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, and audio narration as well.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite a impressive sort of viewpoint from that perspective.
Kenyan culture.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it's sort of
And
yeah.
I think, Luke, you're right. The value here is though you're seeing it as a collection. As in, you're not just looking at one image at a time. You're seeing it in a space and being able to get that broader view of things. So that's why I'm really interested in this. I think what you're looking at here is certainly a notch above the options I've looked at. I'll certainly be trying to find out what the platform was
I wasn't blown away by what I saw, Chris, but I literally looked at the options. It starts at like 10,000 and it goes up to like $25,000, and that's only one exhibition at a time. And it's like, oh my god,
it allows you
stuff.
The iframe on its Kunst Matrix, just so you know.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's the one I signed up for. So,
beauty. You got a benchmark there, then yeah.
Just to add on to what Tom said about adding a story with the image, which I think is really helps to sell a piece of work when there's a personal story that's behind the image. It really elevates the appeal of that artwork. And just with that virtual space, of obviously navigating it, once you arrive at a particular piece of work, you've actually got a narrative in audio that speaks over it whilst you're looking at that image. And I'm sure you can select from a number of different, I guess, tones or voices that you can obviously get to speak whatever transcript that you upload. So it tries to really emulate that.
So it's not your voice, it's an emulated voice.
Correct. Well, I'm sure you could. Well, I'm just making the assumption that potentially you could record your own, make it that more personable experience.
You can, Rick. You can record audio or video and attach that to to the image as well.
Oh, that's awesome! And that's the same platform that you were saying, Chris, that for $10 to $20 a month, you can get into.
Yeah, it's sort of scalable. There is actually, I think that particular platform has a free option. So you can create a space that can exhibit up to 18 pieces, but then the more you pay, the more features you get, and the more and the more art you can produce, and the more spaces you can have, and the more exhibitions and so on. But,
and as part of that, some sort of commission if you sell through their virtual space.
You actually link to your own sales platform, Luke. So again, if you have your own online gallery, it links back to there, and you can sell back through your own platform. So there's no commission that you're paying them. It's you can
paid hosting service by the sounds of it.
Guys, can I add to this conversation? I love that idea, and I'm certainly going to look at that. But also to having one thing that people could try is either having an exhibition and any leftover stock they could try this, or they could actually try this on a one-to-one basis. And this has actually worked for me, so I know it works, is actually taking a piece and standing in front of a camera and actually talking about the piece, and then putting that on Instagram, putting that on Facebook, etc. I've sold art that way. I had my hairdresser ring me and go, Tom, I really love that piece you had on Instagram. How much is it? And I told him, and he goes, yeah, great. I'll transfer the money now. And he was the least likely person I thought was going to buy any art of mine. And I'm eternally grateful that he has, don't get me wrong. But he wouldn't have seen that had I not done that, because he's not on Facebook, and he's all over Instagram because of the industry he's in. And so nothing beats that, people actually seeing you hold the physical print for artwork, whatever it might be, and just talking a little bit about it, talking passionately, telling your story. This is, but put the emotion into it. What I don't do well is I tend to sort of give the mechanics of it, like, oh, this is printed on a beautiful fine art paper, blah, blah, blah. People probably want to hear more of the emotion of the story and why I took it, etc., etc. But it bloody works. And you record it once, you pop it onto Facebook, and you might recycle it 3 times until it sells, but it's worth trying.
Yeah, don't underestimate the power of the personal touch now, whether it be you adding your personal story to that artwork and telling people about that, but also the reverse, that the people come to your exhibition and they've already got a personal connection when they see a particular print. And it might be the location's a big one. It's probably something worth touching on. But people like to or connect very quickly and well with things that they are familiar with. So if you've got an exhibition of abstract rocks or aerials or something like that, it might not have quite a personal impact on someone when they immediately see it. Now, they might be an art lover and looking for art pieces and stuff like that. So they will, obviously, you've got different buyers like that. But I know from experience that people love things that they can personally relate to. So if you're doing an exhibition in Tasmania, for example, and there's a whole bunch of people exhibiting, I guarantee you almost certainly that if someone's showing a popular location that people get married at, go and visit on their holidays with the kids, and that sort of thing, they're immediately drawn to it and are more likely to go for that over something that's a little more, it could be sort of anywhere. Like, for example, the image behind my head at the moment, I really like the piece, but I don't think it gives too many people a personal connection.
Thank you, Chris, everyone.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having us.
Final few minutes anyway, but thanks, Chris, for joining us.
Apologies, guys. I need to run. Have some family commitments to deal with
dramas.
Here, but enjoy your evening and happy Australia Day.
All right, Chris. Before you go, any ways we can look forward to engaging with your exhibition?
Well, look, hopefully in the next week or two, I'll finish off my Kunstmatrix virtual exhibition. And I'll also be doing some live talks through Facebook, I think, or something, some live streams through there in terms of artist talks. So I'll be sure to share the details of those with you guys.
Fantastic. We'll have to have you on as well and chat about it if you're open to it as well. That'd be great.
Absolutely, love to.
I think after his exhibition is done and dusted, we might get Chris back.
Be a busy boy before then.
All right, cheers, guys. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
One thing I wanted to mention too with the virtual space is around. I've just noticed that NFT photographers are also now creating virtual galleries of their work and almost bridging that gap. So you've got the print photographers going virtual, and then you've got these virtual NFTs going into that space too. So it's interesting that those worlds might be colliding in that particular way. And I don't know if there's much to talk about there, but it's just an interesting observation and bringing the digital and print together in that same space is an interesting concept in its own right. So it'll be interesting to see where that leads to. There's also another technology that I was really hoping to try and find an example of, but I haven't been able to, and that's using a phone that recognizes the print that's in front of it, and then the phone actually changes or does a virtual reality, augmented reality rather, and provides details on the print. So it sort of changes the print on the phone, if that makes sense.
Like an embedded
has any of you
QR
guys
code?
seen that? I've seen a few really interesting demonstrations of that on different social media sites and things like that. But I can see a lot of value in that because you could have an overlay of how it was shot or have an audio presentation or something like that just by putting the phone in front of the print. So you've got to say a full print exhibition, and then if you want people to have information, all they have to do is hold their phone up to it, and then the print comes to life on the phone.
Yeah,
so
that technology's been around for quite a while, actually.
Yeah.
Mary mentioned that to me years ago. She saw Michael Warshaw displaying that and pointing. We had the idea of being able to point your phone at a print, and then a pop-up would come of a video of me talking about the artwork, etc. Preferably on location at the same time that you've taken the photo. But yeah, it's brilliant stuff.
And in terms of that, do you see that the effort involved in creating something like that,
worth it?
Is there return on that investment in time? I guess is really where the question is there too.
Yeah, I haven't done that myself, but I absolutely would see the effort involved with doing that for sure. If you've got a story to tell about each of your photographs, and they've got that way of, being able to hear that story without you actually being there for whatever reason.
Might have my work cut out for me the next 2 weeks, boys. I got all sorts of dice running around in my heads now. I got 2.5 weeks left of the show. I'm like, oh my God, I got so many stories behind so many of the images.
Well, it's got you can also do that technology on books as well. So and basically it recognizes your print and then augmented reality will overlay whatever you program it in to do.
I did want to skip back just before we finish. I wanted to skip back to Nick's point that he was making before Chris had to nick off, was that people buy what they connect with. My experience is that I would absolutely love to have 2 galleries here, whether they be side by side or distance apart, doesn't matter.
One what you love and one what sells.
So one that has the Mornington Peninsula artwork in it, which is more decor art, as I call it, which is some of what you see here. But then the other gallery would be my signature gallery, which has all of the aerial abstract work that I do, because we'll have a lot of people that come into the gallery who see that aerial abstract work and admire it, but don't necessarily buy it. We've had people who have bought it. And then we've got our majority of our customers who just want something from the Mornington Peninsula. So we've tried mixing the two, hasn't really worked. I think at the end of the day, we're in this sort of tourist seaside town. So people expect to come into an art gallery, a photographic art gallery, and see local art. And so that's the angle we've gone with now. But it's a shame because I don't get to exhibit my other work that I'm equally as passionate about, which is the aerial abstract stuff. And just Nick's case in point, they admire it and they go, oh, wow, that's interesting. Oh, right, it's not a painting, it's a photograph. But because they can't connect with it in any way, they are less likely to buy it.
In terms of marketing, do you consider doing like you sort of refresh the gallery in a certain style and then create that as like a marketing opportunity in terms of saying, we've got this collection in now, and it's almost like you're holding your own exhibition in your own gallery like that?
Yeah, absolutely. We would love to do that. And in fact, I just stumbled across it yesterday or today, was where I'd several years ago, I think even 3 years ago when we opened this gallery, I'd mapped out a 3-month exhibition schedule. So every 3 months we'd change the exhibition schedule over, and it's just too costly. 25 prints at even $500 to $1,000 each. You're looking at 12, 10, 12, 15, 20, $25,000 in order to swap it over each time. So what we're actually aiming for now is 2 exhibitions a year. So a summer and a winter exhibition is what we're aiming for to have here in the gallery. And you're right, it's a good excuse to do the local PR and have a kick-off at your own gallery.
Well, you've also got the summer winter books, don't you? So that sort of makes sense too.
I've done 2 books here on the Mornington Peninsula that have sold very well, and I haven't done a book launch for either. They've come just before Christmas, and it's just been too tight to fit anything in. So I've got some making up to do. We'll certainly do that with future books that I've got on the go. That's for sure. Like as you would having an exhibition, whether it be in a gallery or a community hall or wherever it might be, it's a great notch in your belt, but it's also a great opportunity to get your family, friends, and everyone else who's supported you, but also just a way of promoting it, and having an opening night is a must do.
And I think to leave on a bit of a note of encouragement, it's the benefits aren't always obvious. And I think they're long-term and sometimes quite deep and quite personal, and maybe will come back to you in different ways you might not expect. And the courage and vulnerability to put yourself out there, it just gets rewarded in ways that often surprise you. And so I wouldn't say, as we said really early on, like maybe don't start with high commercial expectations, but really go in with a lot of passion and personality and gusto, and you'll find it's quite likely going to come back to you in ways, maybe even years down the track, that you didn't expect. That would be probably my personal parting note. And I'm really conscious that it's time to finish, and we haven't covered about 5 of the topics I was looking at, like editioning and sizing and media and
some of those
marketing and socials and a whole bunch of other things. So it could be that we do a part 2 actually.
More from a marketing perspective by the sounds and
there's a lot in there. I like what we've covered, but it's been good. It has been really good. I really appreciate everyone's input. Rick, we haven't sort of given you a bit of a voice for a little while. Is there anything you'd like to sort of share before we sort of close up, or anything you've got from tonight?
If it's one thing that I'll end with, is that I think Tom might have touched on it earlier about psychology. And I think you can really use that to your advantage from a pricing point of view. And that is, I'm a big advocate for putting at least one central piece in your exhibition where you position it at a much higher price rate. Let's say $10,000, because I think that let's say if someone comes in and they see a piece of art on the wall, and they see it for sale for, let's say, $1,200, and looking at that, they might see that, oh, that's a fair investment. But then they come across this big, I guess, feature piece that's priced at $10,000. All of a sudden, they look at that $1,200 piece with different eyes, and you start to think, gee, this artist is selling work for $10,000, and I can afford something for as little as $1,200. It changes their mindset.
Yep.
And I don't think you have anything to lose by just trying that. I think it's a good tactic to use, and I've seen it used in gallery spaces. And I think Tom's someone who also, to a certain degree, uses that tactic. I think it's really, really effective.
I've seen Andres Apps use it in his gallery too. He's got one print, I think 50,000 or something in his. And
wow.
Ken Duncan as well. Yeah, I remember seeing a particular piece at one of Ken Duncan's galleries for 33,000. I think Tom would know it. It's one of 3 12 apostles on the actual beach. He had to apply for a special permit to be allowed down at the beach there. And he owns number 1, Greg Norman owns number 2, and what you're seeing there was number 3, and he had that price for $33,000. And I was looking at his other pieces for $1,600, $2,200. I was thinking, gee, that's a fair outlay. But then I came across this for $33,000. I'm thinking, gee, how cheap is $1,600? Gee, that's I'm gonna pick that up right now. A way to get in to own this artist's work. It's really powerful in the site.
Come on, Rick, you pulled out your gold Amex and you bought the 33,000. I can't believe you haven't got it on the wall at the back there, mate, and showing it off. Being very humble.
It's under my bed. Yeah, I can't really justify putting it up on my wall.
Straight from the Peter Lick playbook, that one, I think.
Yeah, so I'll end on that, but certainly, Paul, there's a lot of other topics that we haven't touched on that I think will be, I think it'd be worthwhile to do a part 2 to really speak at length about some of those other topics that are equally as, I guess, relevant as what we've spoken about tonight.
Yep, sounds good. I just wanted to end on a sort of a going back to the roots thing again, and I know there are a lot of professional photographers that might be watching this, or a few at least. Think about giving of opportunities. I've said this before on the show. I was given an opportunity 10 years ago to exhibit with a couple of very well-known photographers here in Tasmania. It was a massive honour, and it really kick-started my enduring passion for photography. I obviously had that passion there, but it really gave me the confidence that I could move forward and that my work could be seen by people in a similar sort of light. And I think if you are a professional photographer who's looking at doing an exhibition, but maybe you want to share the financial costs, maybe you can look at the young up and coming photographers, or maybe not even young, just people that are passionate, and consider giving them a chance to exhibit with you, and let them sort of get your name next to their name, and give them a real chance to get that sort of kickstart. I think it could have wonderful benefits for both of you. So it's something to think about for those.
Just finishing with giving the audience for the Sky Dreaming exhibition. So I got background videos. This is another thing I haven't discussed, but we actually created fine art cards on the same paper that we exhibit in. And like Tom said, we've got all the details and website stuff on the back. I created a website to go in parallel with it, so people that can't be there in person, and there's artist statements and backstory images and print videos. And that little print video that I created was the idea of how to translate the physicality of print in person that you can't get from a website. But I just thought, I'm trying to think, and I'm right in that space now, about how can I sit in front of all these images and tell their stories, or create a a virtual one to engage people in the work. And I'm really quite excited, I think, from tonight's show in terms of how to translate that into reality. And again, right back to the beginning of what Nick was alluding to, you know, like be really, really sit back on your purpose and the why. You know, if something really makes your heart sing, you know, and whatever reason, that's really going to come to life in terms of however you present your work, or it'll come through in all sorts of ways. And you know, we made a point with the Light Collective ones, as Rick well knows, to that we've got all these different ways that people can connect with the work. We've got videos in the background. We create physical books. We've got prints of 3 different sizes. And in my case, I even go right down to the little fine art cards. So people can't afford a big print, you know, like that ratio thing that Rick was referring to. You know, they're pretty likely and almost always leave with a couple of cards or something. So if you've got a big wide spectrum of accessibility to your work, that can really help it get around and be appreciated in the long term, and be a little bit clever like Tom, and, you know, put your details on the back. So or the website on the back, or just give people lots of ways to keep
sign it when they buy it. That's a great
keep connection with your work. So I'm going to check out this Kunst, whatever call it thing, and
matrix,
what I can come up with. But gentlemen, thanks so much.
Yes, and it's probably worth mentioning that Paul's exhibition is still ongoing, and also you know, available to view on the website as well. It's not like in a VR sense, but it's definitely, all the prints are there still to view and that kind of thing. So that's at skydreaming.com.au, and have that in the notes, and if you're on the email list, it's there. And by the way, we do have a mailing list, so it's at subscribe.tlp.show, and so you can actually, that's to subscribe to the channel, but it's list.tlp.show is the mailing list. So if you want to you know, get updates and know what's happening with the show each week, please subscribe to that mailing list, and you'll get the information each week on what we're getting up to. So, and
if you're in Melbourne, get down and see Tom.
Absolutely.
Tom, I thought you were about to sign on the lens there, like Australian Open.
The Australian Open.
It looks like
there's this horrible lens flare that I just realized coming in on my camera, and if I hold my finger over the top,
you'll get there one day, Tom.
Sign on it. Go on, sign on it.
Yeah. Let's see your T-shirt behind Tom.
You
have to talk.
If you're going to have an exhibition, you want to get yourselves a T-shirt, or if you just want one of these T-shirts, I'll send it to you, and you can have something like that, Ricardo.
Talk again, Tom, so we can see.
I saw the big writing. What does the small writing say?
It says it's tough being so good, or something like that.
He's actually got a tattoo on his back as well.
That's it.
Well,
I think on my back, on my ass. That's where it is.
I actually had in mind that I wanted to finish the show on that, because 2 words: back yourself.
Yeah. Yep.
Seriously, back yourself. I mean, there's a bit of a pun on how Tom just presented it, but that is an absolutely key and crucial component in exhibiting, and really a lot of ways what it's all about. Just back yourself. Just give it a go.
Yeah, just do it. You won't.
Good note to end it on, Paulie.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks so much for joining us, guys.
Next week, for the pleasure.
Sorry, mate.
I said thank you for the privilege.
Privilege is all ours, Rick.
Don't worry about that, Rick, man. It's I noticed all you boys are wearing shorts.
It's a warm one.
Summer's rocking.
Yeah, it's warm one in Melbourne tonight. Yeah, Tom's just down the road from where I live.
It was so hot today. It was like 35 degrees and no wind pretty much all day.
Wow. Well, we got it good down here then.
Everybody, I went to the beach for a swim at about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and they were already packed. Like everyone just went down to the beach with their eskies and their umbrellas, and it was just dead flat on the water, and it was so hot and quite humid for Melbourne this time of year as well. We're having a pretty good summer, to be honest, but today was a stinker.
Wow. Yeah. Totally different down here. That's
right.
Yeah.
Great show, guys. Really,
I just wanted to mention too, in terms of next week's show, we have Ian Rolfe coming on to talk about his background in photography and also Norfolk Island. So that should be a great show for anyone that's interested in Norfolk Island. I think there's a bit of a hidden gem. Well, not hidden, but there are quite a few great locations on the island, and Ian's been going there for a long time, photographing and running workshops there. So he'll have, I think it'll be a brilliant show. So he's going to put a presentation together for us. So that should be brilliant.
Awesome.
Great. Well, yeah,
Awesome.
guys, thanks once again. It's an absolute honour to have you back on, and hopefully many more times to come if we haven't scared you away. And
We really appreciate your time, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thank you so
No
much.
worries. Thank you for the opportunity.
No worries.
Thanks once again.
And thanks to all you at home for watching, and please subscribe and like the video if you'd like to follow along.
Oh yeah,
on
thanks
channel.
for the magic 1,000, guys.
Yeah, the 1,000's
About
nice
time.
to hit. So
Oh,
nice to
YouTubers.
champagne tonight to celebrate. But yeah, no,
YouTuber Nick.
Yay.
all right. Well, until next week. See you guys later.